Okay, so again, this should just be a review from last year. You don't need to write this down. Okay, so when you're adding fractions, just a reminder, okay, the denominator, you don't add the denominator stays the same. So it's just gonna stay an 8. Okay, and remember, all you do is add the top. And so what do we get when we add the numerators of these two fractions? Sarah Grace?
3/4.
Well, before that.
6/8.
Right, so we're gonna get a 6. Okay, so the main thing is just remember you don't add the denominator, just the numerator. Okay, but then, like Sarah Grace just said, this answer does still need to be reduced because it's not in simplest form, so you can divide them both by 2, so you would get 3/4. Okay, so again, that should hopefully just be a review from last year.
That's adding.
But this is where, again, you're not writing anything down. This is just a review from last year. Now is where you're gonna write something down. So go to your next empty page. And today we're going to look at adding and subtracting fractions that don't have the same denominator. So adding / subtracting fractions with, and you can just do a W with a slash, that's with, and it's called unlike denominators. Okay, so we're going to do adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So the denominators are not going to be the same. Okay, adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. And we're going to put 3 different examples in your composition book. Okay, we're going to put 3 different examples in there because there's basically 3 different things that can happen. Okay, so I'm going to take this off so I have space. Or again, we're going to do 3 different examples. Okay, here's our first one. So I want you to put 2/3 plus 1/8. No, I've already said that. I said we're putting 3 different examples in your composition book. This is example 1. Okay, so you have to have a common denominator in order to add fractions. So this is why I had you memorize the least common multiple shortcuts. We need the least common multiple of 3 and 8. Okay, that would go with shortcut 1. They only share a factor of 1. So what do you do if 2 numbers only share a factor of 1 and you want their least common multiple, which in this situation would actually be called least common denominator because it's the least common multiple of the denominators. Brock?
24.
You're going to multiply them together. Okay, so again, remember that was the example we had for the first shortcut is they only share a factor of 1, so we're going to multiply them. So we're going to change them both to 24. Okay, so that's, again, we're going to combine a whole bunch of steps. So that's one thing we've learned recently is the least common multiple shortcut. Okay, now we need to get these fractions, we need equivalent fractions that have a 24 on the bottom. We just did this recently too. So remember you say, what do you do to go from 8 to 24? Whatever that is, that has to happen here. And then you say, what do you do to go from 3 to 24? Whatever that is, that has to happen here. Okay? So what do you do to go from 8 to 24? What happens right here, Nathan?
Multiply them by 3.
Okay, so I've got to multiply by 3 here. So what do I get?
1.
You're gonna you just said you're multiplying by 3.
6.
So you're gonna multiply by 3.
3.
3. Okay? And then you say, what do you do to go from 3 to 24? Okay, whatever happens, that same thing has to happen on the top. So what's missing for the top part, Kira? What do you do to go from 3 to 24?
Multiply by 8.
So I've got to multiply by 8 on top.
Then it would be 16.
Right, 16. Okay, so again, we just did this recently, finding equivalent fractions. Okay, so we found a common denominator, again, because you have to have the denominator be the same. We used our shortcuts to figure that out. These only share a factor of 1, so we multiplied, and we got 24. You said times 8 times 8 times 3 times 3. Now all we do is add our numerator and put it on top of our denominator, and we have our answer. And so what would we get, Brock?
19 24.
19 24. is our answer. And you can't reduce it. So the answer is 19/24. Okay, so that's example 1. Okay, we're gonna do 2 more examples because there's 2 other things that can happen. So you'll have an example of everything that could happen in your notes. So let's look at another example. Let's look at 1/5 plus 3/10. Okay, so our denominators are 5 and 10. Okay, remember one of our least common multiple shortcuts is if one number goes into the other, then what is the least common multiple? If one number goes into the other, the least common multiple is what, Abby?
2.
No,
It's
remember
the bigger
the
number.
second shortcut. If one number goes into the other, the least common multiple is
The biggest number. 5.
no,
Is the other number.
it's
the bigger number.
the bigger number. If one number goes into the other, the least common multiple is the bigger number. So that tells you that our least common multiple has to be 10 because 5 goes into 10, so 10 is our least common multiple. So all we need to do is change this fraction. This one already has a 10 on the bottom. We don't need to change it. We just need to change this top fraction. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. You say, what do you do to go from 5 to 10? That same thing needs to happen here. Okay, so what do you do to go from 5 to 10? The same thing needs to happen on the top. Eva.
You get it 2 times.
Times 2 times 2. Exactly. Okay, so now we're adding 2/10 and 3/10. So what do we get when we add 2/10 and 3/10? Carson?
5/10 or 1/2.
5/10. Exactly, which reduces, because we can reduce it to 1/2, because you can divide them both by 5. So last problem, we got an answer, it didn't need to be reduced, we were good. This one, we got an answer, but it still needed to be reduced, so we needed to reduce it to 1/2. Kira, question?
So, for example, like, we have homework.
I can't hear you.
We have homework.
Yes.
So on the homework, like, if we didn't reduce it, would it be counted as wrong?
It'd be half off. Like if it were on a test, it would be half. And that would be basically any math, any time in math. Like the correct answer is technically the simplest part. Okay, there's one other thing that can happen, so let's look what's going to happen with the last thing that can happen. All right, so we're going to do, let's do 5/9 plus 1/2. 5/9 plus 1/2. Okay, so 9 and 2. So is that shortcut 1? They only share a factor of 1, so we multiply them. Is it that 2 goes into 9, so 9's our least common multiple? Or is it that they share more than 1 as a factor, and so we would multiply them and divide by the biggest thing that goes into both? So what fits with 9 and 2? They only share 1 as a factor, 2 goes into 9, or they share more than 1 as a factor. Which one would fit with this one? Hattie?
Multiply number 1.
Exactly, they only share 1 as a factor, so what would be our least common multiple?
Our least common multiple would be 1. Sorry. Wait, our least common multiple would be
If they only share 1 as a factor, you
multiply. You multiply them.
raise your hand then. Multiply them.
And then you'll see this.
And so what would be our least common multiple then?
Least common multiple would be 9.
If two numbers only share 1 as a factor, you multiply the two numbers. So what is our least common multiple, Giancarlo? 18. Okay, so 18 is our least common multiple. Again, that's why we memorize those 3 shortcuts. Okay? All right, now on the top, you say, what do you do to go from 9 up to 18? And the same thing has to happen up at the top. On the bottom, you say, what do you do to go from 2 to 18? And the same thing has to happen on the top. So Kira, why don't you tell me the top fraction? What do you get for this missing number up here? Times 2, or missing a 10. Okay, what are we missing on the bottom? Brock?
Oh, 9.
Times 9 times 9.
I have the
Okay, we add, and we get 19/18. Okay, which is an improper fraction. Okay, we can't leave it that way. And again, something else we've just recently learned how to do is switch that to a mixed number. Remember, we learned 2 ways to do it. Pick whichever one you want. And Eva, what did I get for 19/18?
1 and 1/18.
1 and 1/18. Okay, so you've seen all three things that can happen. You could get an answer that doesn't need to be reduced. You could get an answer that needs to be reduced. Or you could get an answer that is improper. We gotta switch it to a mixed number. Okay, and subtraction is the same thing. It's just you'll subtract instead of add. So like if this were a subtraction problem, you would have done 10 minus 9, which is 1. It would have been 1/18. Okay, if it were subtraction. Okay, so let's go to your whiteboard. And if you have, and most of you do, a whiteboard that's rectangular shape, I would turn it this way. Since our problem is, you know, up and down like that, so you won't run out of space, I would turn it long ways. Okay, so let's try some, we'll do a couple of addition and we'll do some subtraction ones too.
Will we do a math challenge today?
All right, let's do 2/5 plus 5/6. Okay, 2/5 plus 5/6. Okay, so again, the first thing we need to do is find the least common multiple for 5 and 6. So is it that they only share a factor of 1, so we're going to multiply them? Is it that 5 goes into 6, so 6 is our least common multiple? Or is it that 5 and 6 share more than 1 as a factor, so we have to multiply them and divide by the biggest thing that goes into both? So which one would fit with 5 and 6? Ellen?
5 is oh, they only share one as a factor.
And so we're going to do what? We're going to multiply them. So what would be our least common multiple?
30.
30. Okay, again, please raise your hand, and I'm talking to Ellen, so I shouldn't hear anyone else. All right, so 30 is our least common multiple, our least common denominator. So now we just have to figure out what happens on each one and figure out the missing part. So what would be our missing part of the top one, Kira?
12.
Times 6 times 6, we are missing a 12. Okay, what's missing on the bottom?
25.
25 times 5 on bottom times 5 on top, 25. So we need to add 25 and 12. So what would 25 plus 12 be? Patty?
25.
5 and 2, 2 and 1.
Oh, sorry.
5 and 2 is what?
Oh, sorry. 7.
And 2 and 1. Okay, so we're going to have 37 30ths. Again, we have an improper fraction that we need to switch to a mixed number. So what would we get for our final answer, Nathan?
1 7/30.
1 and 7/30. Okay, this should not be really hard as much as it is. You got to be careful because there's so many little parts where you could make a mistake. Okay, let's try this one because we're going to use shortcut. We're going to use shortcut 3 for this one to find the common denominator. Okay, let's do 11/12, and we're going to be subtracting. The only thing to be careful about on this is just remember to subtract rather than add. So 11/12 minus 7/8. 11/12 minus 7/8. Okay, I already told you this is going to be shortcut 3. And the reason it's shortcut 3 is because 12 and 8 share more than just 1 as a factor. Okay, 12 and 8 share more than 1 as a factor. So the first thing we need to do is multiply 12 times 8. Okay, so what do we get when we multiply 12 times 8? Sarah Grace.
94.
You're close. 8 times 2.
96.
Yes, 96. Okay, and then we need to divide by the biggest thing. What's the biggest thing that goes into both 12 and 8, and it's not 2?
4.
Again, I did not see your hand up. Eva.
4.
4. Okay, short division will tell you really quickly how many times 4 goes into 96.
Oh.
Okay, again, something else we learned this year, using it again. So what would we get for our least common denominator or least common multiple for 12 and 8? Sarah Grace.
24.
24. Okay, now we need to figure out our missing parts. Okay, we know that this has got to be times 3, and this is going to have to be times 2, because it's times 2 and times 3. So what are we missing for the parts? Ellen, what are we missing up here?
22
Uh-huh.
and 14.
Yes. Wait, This is times 3.
Oh, okay, sorry. 21.
Yes. And remember, it's subtraction. So it's just 22 minus 21. 22 minus 21 over 24. And so what would we get, Kira? 124. Okay, and just be careful because it's so easy to accidentally, like you've been adding and like, oh wait, we're subtracting.
Yeah, I accidentally added it.
Okay, let's try another subtraction. Again, same thing, it's just subtracting instead of add. Okay, let's do 7/9 minus 3/4. Okay, so our two numbers are 9 and 4. So we need a least common multiple for 9 and 4. Okay, 9 and 4 only share one as a factor, so it's got to be shortcut 1. So what would be our least common multiple? Kira?
36.
36. Okay, and so again, you say, what do you do to go from 9 to 36? That needs to happen here. What do you do to go from 4 to 36? That needs to happen here. Okay, Nathan, what would I get for the top?
35.
What do you do to go from 9 to 36?
Oh, times 5.
Times 5. Remember, anything times 5 ends in 5 or 0. So 9 times 5's got to be something that ends in 5. So 9 times
4.
okay, so the top's got to be times 4. So what would I be missing up here, Nathan?
36.
This is times 4. This has to be times 4. 7 times 4.
28.
28. Okay, on the bottom, we say, what do we do to go from 4 to 36? And that same thing needs to happen on the top. Patty.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask a question.
Yes.
Oh, can I ask you this question?
Yes.
I don't really understand how you get the top number.
Okay, this is what we did last week when we did equivalent fractions. And you just say, whatever we had a missing part and we figured out the missing part, you say, what do you do to go from here to here? That's times 4. So that means the top has to be times 4 too. Then at the bottom, you say, what do you do to go from 4 to 36? That's times 9. So this has to be times 9 also. Ellen, what am I missing up here? Okay, and this actually is weirdly the same thing as last time. The top number is one more than the bottom. So it's 28 minus 27, and it's over 36. Kira?
136.
136. Okay? So just taking a whole bunch of stuff we've done and putting it all together. Okay, so we're going to